Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, in the interest of time, I'm just going to, not really elaborate on some of the aspects that have been really covered in the presentation so far. So starting, Mr. Peters really talked about the view an organization can take towards IP, and how to really going about unlocking the value out of it. So I'm just going to share a different perspective, which is what is really happening in the market, how the market has been evolving, and how certain corporations are reacting to it, and what is that really can be done about it. So if we start from basics, what is a business tool? That's something that provides a competitive advantage that contributes to the growth of a company by increasing its revenue or helping managing the cost. If we look at IP traditionally, it was always being seen as a something that gives you competitive advantage in the marketplace. Go back 10, 20, 30 years, people would file for patents or seek trademarks because they wanted to block their competitors from using that intellectual property. But that view has been changing. There has been a paradigm shift, especially over the last about 10 years, where IP is extensively being used as a revenue lever and a cost lever. And let's take a few examples to demonstrate that. Look at some of the companies, Qualcomm, IBM, Texas Instruments, they're making billions out of, licensing and royalties in the year 2012, with Qualcomm making roughly about $4 billion in 2012. And then there is an extremely different set of companies, Intellectual Ventures, InterDigital, Acacia, Rambus, which we'll talk about a little bit more in detail, what role they play in the market space. But that really shows how IP is increasingly being used as a revenue lever. And not just as a revenue lever, but as a profit lever too. If you go down a little bit deeper into Qualcomm, the numbers that show up on the slide, this basically, the first chart shows up the quarterly licensing revenue that Qualcomm has generated from licensing royalties. And if you deduct the cost, which is the R&D expenses, the money that was used to generate that sales, you would see that of roughly about $1 billion in licensing revenue, the profit was roughly in excess of $500 million, which is obviously not a small amount of number. And I'm just going to, I think, dig a little deeper into Qualcomm here using one of the questions that someone had asked here about the valuation of patents, right? So I think it's obviously a very complicated or a complex stuff that how do you really value a patent, right? By definition, patent is unique, and therefore using historical data to assign a value, may or may not make sense in certain contexts. But one thing which has been changing is that how do you really estimate the value of a portfolio, right? So it's very hard to value a patent, and Mr. Peters, as he put it, the beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So, but what certain organizations are doing is that using the historical numbers for patent royalties, they are coming up with the the value of the portfolio or the value that it contributes towards the enterprise value. So, when I was reading this report, it basically said that, when you look at Qualcomm's licensing revenue and use discounted cash flows method using this run rate and come up with a net present value, which comes to be roughly about $12 billion in total. And Qualcomm has roughly about 10,000 patents in their portfolio for that size, which is basically the value of each patent is roughly about $1.3 billion, right? So it's, I'm not suggesting that that puzzle has been solved, but the point that I really want to make is that using the, these stats, which is licensing and royalty revenues, it is relatively easier to come up with a value of a portfolio. And if you compare that number with, Google's acquisition of Motorola Mobility, each patent there was valued at roughly about $750,000, right? So Qualcomm's per patent value is roughly double of that, if we just look at the numbers. IP is also being increasingly used as a cost management lever. And let's look at, RPX. I'm sure pretty much everybody is familiar with RPX, but at the core of it, the model of RPX is that it's a, in layman terms, it's an insurance company. You go buy a subscription, pay a certain amount of fee based on your size and, the portfolio and everything. And what they do is that they use a crowdsourcing model to actually use that money to buy patents under litigation. So what they're really doing is mitigating threat for you, right? So companies like IBM, Google, Cisco, all these guys have invested, they're alliance members of RPX because they just want to counter that threat, from the marketplace. And similarly, Intellectual Ventures, it's a patent aggregator. And similarly, there are companies who invested in them too. And, sometimes, you wonder that, why, companies like Microsoft or Google would invest in both of them, because the strategies are completely opposite to each other. So, but we can always keep wondering that. And I think, what has really happened is that alongside, there has been a corresponding evolution of the IP ecosystem. So traditional competitive advantage scenario, you just have, individual inventors, corporations, and specialized service providers like law firms, patent analytics providers, searching firms, and so on. But, over the last about 10 years, this is the evolved ecosystem. So in addition to these traditional entities, you have aggregators or investors, you have transaction intermediaries, you have enforcers, and you have specialized IP development or licensing companies. And here are a few examples, licensing specialists. So there are corporate licensing spin-outs, Philips IP and Standards is certainly one of them as a licensing spin-out. Then there are university tech transfer agents. There are independent licensing companies like General Patent. We have different types of entities as transaction intermediaries, like brokers like Pluritas, IPIG. We have auction houses like Ocean Tomo, and then there are M&A advisors, PCT Capital and Pluritas again. And then there's a completely different breed of entities which are aggregators of funds, Intellectual Ventures, RPX we already talked about. There are purely financial investors in the space. There are some European patent funds. Credit Suisse is very active, Deutsche Bank, Alpha Patent Funds. And if we just look at a few other examples of litigation financiers, so there are single inventor assertion firms, NTP, very famous in the RIM litigation, RKL, Lemson Foundation. All right. And then finally, there is a breed of IP development and licensing companies. So, these guys also invest a lot of money in coming up with inventions. So ARM, Interdigital, Rambus, Tessera. Now, I really want to take an example of this evolution of ecosystem. Mr. Lakshmi Kumaran talked about, the ecosystem part. But some of the companies have really adapted well. And one of the example that stands out is Microsoft. And the reason I say that is pre-2000, if you look at the Microsoft's patent portfolio, there were just about 8 patents they filed or got granted in the first 15 years of their inception, and roughly about another 1475 patents. So net-net, in the first 25 years of the business, in which they created a lot of enterprise value, they just had about 1,500 patents. But they were sued very frequently in the late 90s, and they had a minimal arsenal to counter that. Microsoft had a belief that they had a very unique business model, and they essentially did not pay too much attention to IP because that was the traditional view of IP. But then they reacted very aggressively and started first building a portfolio. So if you look at the numbers, in the next 5 years, they got about 8,000 patents, and in the following 5 years, they have acquired a portfolio of roughly about another 30,000 patents. And now you see them in one of the top 5 filers list all the time. Not just that, they also valued licensing. So they executed about 1,100 IP licensing agreements since about 2002. They invested in Intellectual Ventures. They invested in RPX. They bought AOL's patent portfolio of about roughly $1 billion. And then finally, they were also part of the Rockstar consortium. So when Nautil's portfolio was bid, Rockstar acquired it for roughly $4.5 billion. And Microsoft is just one part of that. And Rockstar has been tasked to actually commercialize or really monetize that portfolio, right? So what you really see happening is that Microsoft taking a very passive position to becoming a very aggressive position, which is not just building a portfolio, but using other means to assume a larger role in the IP ecosystem and truly use IP as a business tool. Which is why I thought that it's an example which is really worth mentioning here. Now, adapting to the shift is very important. And I think there are 2 aspects to it. One is that, realizing that IP is tangible and a liquid asset. So we have seen several examples. And then finally, taking a holistic view towards IP. And this is not just about taking, having a very focused IP strategy. It is about taking a holistic view. You can't say that I'm going to just have a purely licensing strategy around IP. You have to start from the basics and see that what happens really the life cycle. So starting with IP and R&D strategy, you really track what the competition is doing, where the opportunities in the market space, how is the landscape fragmented, who are the prolific inventors, who are the prolific companies in that space. So I think that understanding really helps you figure out what's going on in the market, and also where the opportunities are. And once you've done that, Mr. Peters again talked about in-house development of assets, and then scouting or acquisitions. So these are the two means that you really use to build a patent portfolio, which then really goes into the patent portfolio management aspects, and that's where the value starts really. I mean, so far it has been just a cost center for a company, but thereafter, you talk about means of IP enforcement, doing infringement analysis, figuring out who are the people who are trespassing your intellectual property, looking at IP monetization tools, and if there's a need, getting into IP litigation and various stages. And I think throughout everywhere, you got to be very careful about the fact that you're not stepping on someone's shoes, which is all about IP risk mitigation. I think there are I just want to flag two important considerations here that, certainly taking a holistic view of IP is important, but then there should be strong, one of the important factors is the prior art or the invalidity of certain patents. So, this goes back to the same point that how strong is your assessment while you are filing for patents. So that is very, very important. Similarly, there is another example of Dow Chemicals and Cargill litigation where Cargill had sued Dow Chemicals and in a patent infringement suit, and Dow Chemicals countersued them on another patent. And the result of that case was Cargill lost their patent battle because the best mode of the invention wasn't disclosed in it. It was a canola oil litigation. And at the same time, they lost the litigation on which Dow Chemical had countersued them. So they, one of their business units was literally wiped out because of that. But this goes back to the same point that, if proper assessment is done, if the patent was filed with the right strategy in disclosing the best mode, as well as the fact that proper validity searches could have been done before actually going to someone and suing them. So that strong assessment is very, very important. And finally, cost-effective execution, which is equally important to change. That's all I have. Thank you.